Right, thank you for clicking on this video, and today I'll be discussing, as the title suggests, fat. Not only what it is, but also how you get it, its health benefits, its health risks, and how to reduce it or increase it to a healthy level, because that's what we're all about. It's all about a bit of a balance here, as I will say at the end. So let's just jump right in, and before I jump right in, I will just say this channel, that there's a lot of biological content on here. So if you want to learn more about different health topics, different biological topics, anything science really related, make sure to like and subscribe, as this is what I do. So let's dive right in. So fat. Fat is, as I will explain in a second, it's like stores of like triglycerides, fatty acids, all this kind of stuff. But in these fat cells, and which I will talk about in a second. So how do you gain fat? Well, I'll obviously talk about this more towards the end as well. It's slightly more nuanced than what I'm about to say here, but basically, fat increase of fats deposits come from a calorie surplus. So that means that you're eating more calories than you are getting out, either in, so like your body resting caloric like need. I don't know what the actual equation is, but it's something to do with like your height and your weight and something like that. And then on top of that, you've also got all of the exercise and stuff that you do uh, that requires energy. So calorie surplus is what it's called. So if you have a calorie surplus, then your body will convert those extra calories into fat, which I will explain in a second. So there are different obvious, and I'll get into a second like why calorie surplus is like, it's a bit of an iffy way to define fat loss, even though it is true. But yeah, let's get on to the conversion, because different food molecules are converted to fats in different ways when you have reached a calorie surplus in the body. So let's move on to carbohydrates first. So firstly, when you eat like carbohydrates, this is your sugar, this is your starch, this is all that kind of stuff. You get the hormone insulin, which is also related to diabetes. I think you don't have enough insulin, or your body is sensitive to insulin when you have diabetes. But when you have insulin, the carbohydrates and the glucose is converted into glycogen, which is stored then in the liver and the muscle cells. And glycogen is a polymer of alpha glucose. It's got a coiled helical shape. It stores loads of energy, and it's have a large surface area, so it's easily hydrolyzed for respiration. But this isn't really what we're talking about here. So that's when you've not got a caloric surplus. That's when you're just eating the carbohydrates normally. But when you've reached that caloric surplus, let's say you need 3,000 calories and you've eaten 3,010. Those extra 10, if those extra 10 came from carbohydrates, then the extras are converted into fat in a process called de novo lipogenesis. I was going to include this into the video, but this video is already going to end up being very long. So if you do want me to do a video on de novo lipogenesis, then I will in the future, as I do believe that it is a very interesting topic to get into. But so far, I will have to glaze over that, even though it is very interesting. I did research it, but there just isn't time. So let's move on to fats. Fats, you get this in your butter. As I just mentioned, yeah, you get this in your butter. You get this in your milk. You get this in like your oils. It's just what you think fat is, basically. Also, the fat cells, which I'll get onto, of other animals. So yeah, it's dietary fat. It's most efficiently stored, and it requires the least processing because it already is fat. It already is fat. It doesn't need to be processed like carbohydrates and proteins do. It can just be put right into your fat cells. So, proteins. Once your proteins have been used up, you've digested them, and then you've created more proteins or you've excreted them. If you've got your calorie surplus, they are not stored as proteins in the body, they are stored as fats. So they are converted into glucose slash fats. All very well and good. So, let's move on to a little bit of storage, which will affect the next part of this video, which is how fats are not only beneficial but also harmful to our health. So let's dive right in. Fats are stored in the adipose tissue in a form of triglycerides. You've got subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that's like just beneath your skin. This is like your average belly fat or your average fat that's like around your arms and stuff like that. And then you've got visceral fat, which is more commonly associated with things like diseases and stuff like that. It comes with fat, like heart disease and stuff like that, and that's the fat that is between your organs, and it's not very good in the slightest, which I will get onto in a bit when it comes to the bad things that come with fat. And fat is stored in these big cells. They've got this big fat reservoirs. These have got all your triglycerides. They've got all your fatty droplets. These store a bunch of energy. And then you've got the membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, and mitochondria, all the obvious things that you'd have in an animal cell. You've also got, I won't dive into this too deeply, but you've got these white fatty cells, which have got a white colour, don't have that much blood flow, and don't have that much mitochondria. They are most associated with health problems. And then you've also got these brown fat cells, which have more mitochondria, they have more blood flow. They are associated with good metabolic health and good overall health in general. So, without further ado, let's move on to stick around because let's move on to the benefits and dangers of fat. Right, welcome back. Now I will be discussing not only the benefits of fat, because there are some benefits, it's not all bad, but also the risks of fat. Now, right, let's start with the benefits. So, fat is a energy-dense store. It contains 3,500 calories per pound, which is more than carbohydrates. So that's like your glycogen and stuff like that. Fat contains a lot more energy, and this is good because it means that you can store a lot of excess energy for like evolutionarily for like a day that you didn't have food, and a day that you couldn't eat a lot. Nowadays, there isn't really, especially in the Western developed world, there isn't really that many days where people are like spending weeks or days without food. I mean, there are, but in terms of fat people, that's not really the case. You get what I mean. I'm not trying to be rude. So, it's an energy dense store, which means, yeah, you can contain a lot of energy inside your body. Next benefit. It is important for cell structure and cell function. So, you've got the cell membrane, so inside of every single cell there's something called a phospholipid bilayer, which uses phospholipids, and then you've got like the hydrophobic head and the hydrophilic head and the hydrophobic tails, and they kind of join together to create this fluid mosaic model. Kind of more on this in my video about cholesterol, but it's just a biological concept where that's just what the cell surface membrane is made of, and therefore fats are really important to maintain the structure of every single cell, because without it you'd just be jelly, or you'd be worse than jelly, you'd just be a big puddle. So fat is important for that, but that's more biochemical. Nerve function, so you've got like these myelin sheaths around all of your nerve cells, which is like responsible for like the transfer of the ions and therefore the movement of all of your muscles and all that kind of stuff and all of your reflex actions. And as well as this, 60% of your brain is fat, so you need fat to maintain the health of your brain, otherwise your brain won't work, and that isn't very good because you need your brain to live. So, hormones. I've put a little warning sign here because, yes, in moderation, fat can maintain healthy levels of hormones, but if you have too much fat or too little fat, then you'll get hormone imbalances, which is very bad. So, which I will mention in a second. So you've hormones such as estrogen, testosterone, which is involved in reproductive health, as well as leptin, which is involved in hunger regulation and stuff like that, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. That is all regulated by having a healthy amount of fat. All of these benefits come from having a healthy amount of fat. Not too much, not too little, healthy. Because you don't want to have 0% body fat, and you don't want to have like plus 50% body fat. You don't really want to have anything above 30, but like maybe you do. 50 is like a red line, I'd say. Insulation. It maintains body temperature via a process called thermogenesis, which, as I said before, you've got like these brown fat cells. These have a lot more mitochondria. These have a lot more blood flow, and then you got more respiration, which is an exothermic reaction, which releases heat, and therefore can keep you hot when it is nice and cold. So let's say you've had like a cold exposure or something like that, or you're out on a cold day, it can keep you nice and hot, and it's also a nice bit of insulation so that you don't rapidly lose or gain temperature. Now, let's have a look at some of these risks. Okay, so number one risk, this affects all the other risks really, but obesity. You got the extra fat cells, and if you've got loads and loads and loads of extra fat cells, then this will cause obesity over time, which is bad, and it can kind of lead to all of these other things. You've also got type 2 diabetes, which is where your body, over time, it kind of gets like used to insulin, and then so when your body does produce insulin, then insulin can no longer be used by your cells to convert glucose into glycogen, which I mentioned before, polymer alpha glucose, and that's bad because then you'll have a very high blood sugar, and yeah, that's bad. Cardiovascular diseases, because of the high LDL cholesterol which is found in fat. Please do watch my video on cholesterol if you do want to learn more about that in particular and how that actually affects your health, because I get into it in a bit more detail there. But basically, it can cause these plaque buildups, and as I was saying in a second, it can cause like hypertension, which is high blood pressure, heart disease, and not some very bad stuff. So yeah, please go and watch my video on cholesterol if you do want to learn more about LDL and cholesterol in particular. So, fatty liver disease. This is different to what I mentioned in my alcohol video. Go and watch that if you want to. This is a non-alcohol related fatty liver disease, which can cause inflammation. And if you want to watch my video on seed oils, then you'll know why inflammation is bad. These are all on my channel, by the way. It's just lovely to see how biological topics kind of intersect with each other. So feel free to watch them if you want to. If you've liked this one, you'll probably like those ones. Advert over. Let's get back to the content. Hypertension, which is where you've got like that high blood pressure, and it can cause many health problems because your blood is moving too high of a pressure. You've got like it can cause heart disease and all that kind of stuff, and it's not very good. It can cause stroke, increased chance of heart attack, and you just don't want. So yeah, you've also got cancer, in particular breast or colon cancer. Those are both caused by increased levels of fat. And also this is linked to obesity and all that weight gain type of stuff. Joint issues, because the increased stress on the joints due to the increased amount of weight. So if you've got an increased amount of weight, then if you do physics or if you do maths or if you know anything about gravity, then more gravity will act upon your body because of your higher weight, and this will cause the joints, especially if you don't do exercise, which is one of the main reasons for fat gain, which I'll get onto in a second, but especially if you don't do exercise, that'll increase the stress on your joints, and your joints won't be able to cope, and you won't be able to walk around, which is why you see all of those people in mobility scooters which are fat, which is like pouring salt over a wound. It just makes it worse. It just makes it worse. Don't get a mobility scooter if you're fat. Just, I don't know, walk. Sorry. Right. So, kind of linked to this, let me deliver my final monologue on how to lose or to not gain fat. It's kind of similar to what I said at the beginning, but just the other way around, with a couple of extra steps. So let me move to the center, adjust the focus. Here we go. Right. Am I in the center? Who cares? Right, so as I said at the beginning, let's have a little drink. Sorry about this. Right. As I said at the beginning, fat gain is caused 100% because of a calorie surplus, but saying that it's just because of a calorie surplus is slightly disingenuous, but only because there isn't like such thing as like a nobody really knows how many calories are in food, which is why it's difficult for people to measure the calories unless they specifically count them, which I do not recommend counting your calories because that will just lead to a whole host of other issues. So it's very difficult for people to actually know how much calories they are eating in a day because nowadays you've got these things called processed food. Watch my video on seed oils. I hate processed food, but you've got this thing called processed food. So you've got your snacks, you've got your chocolate, and you've got all these foods, and they are very calorie dense, and they are very easy to eat, and they do not make you feel full. So, in short, you've got these foods like a crisp. You'll eat a whole packet of them without even realizing that you've eaten a whole packet of them. They contain hundreds of calories, thousands of calories, um, and you eat them, and you don't realize that you've eaten them, and they are not part of a balanced diet in the slightest. They will not give you any health benefits apart from a slight dopamine release, but they are not good. Many people do not realize that they are actually going to increase their calories. So unless that's the only thing that they eat in a day, then it's obviously not going to be the only thing they eat in a day. So if they eat like 3 normal meals or 2 normal meals, but they also have a couple snacks, a couple chocolate bars, and they will be overshooting their calorie surplus. They'll have a calorie surplus in the thousands, and they will gain a lot of fat very quickly. So that is number one on why it isn't just about. I mean, it is obviously just about calorie surplus, but it's about what you eat as well. So you want to have a balanced diet with all of your minerals, nutrients, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and all that kind of stuff. Um, without so you want to do all of that and then try and limit the amount of snacks and stuff that you eat as well. I don't know who said it. I think it might have been Mike Menser or somebody like that, but he said, it's true. If you ate 2,000 calories of sugar or 1,000 calories of sugar every single day, you would lose fat, and that is true. But that doesn't mean that you should only eat 1,000 calories of sugar every day because you probably get like scurvy or something like that, or rickets, where you're not getting all the nutrients that you need. So, yeah, eat. Also, you want to eat protein and fiber because they will take calories to break down. So that means that you're reducing that calorie surplus. I mean, you obviously want a little bit of calorie surplus if you're going to build muscle, but you don't want a lot of calorie surplus if you're not working out. And that brings me to my next point, which is working out. Working out is probably the easiest way to lose weight or lose that calorie surplus and put yourself into a calorie deficit, which is how you lose fat. You could probably, if you're eating a lot, if you're eating like 5 McDonald's a day, then maybe I don't recommend this, but you could, let's say you were eating like 1,000 calories above surplus, which is probably what a lot of people do every day. If you subsidized that calorie surplus with like an hour or so workout every day, maybe like a jog or a run or maybe some compound lifts, then you could probably turn that 1,000 surplus into a deficit of some point, or at least make it roughly level, so that even if you did want to not give up your chocolate, or you didn't want to give up your alcohol, or you didn't want to give up your crisps, I think you call them chips in America, but if you didn't want to give up any of that, then you could probably still lose weight if you did a lot of exercise. But overall, what you want to do is you want to have a balanced diet with all of the things that I mentioned before, uh, without having snacks, without having alcohol, without having chocolate, without having processed food, and also doing a lot of exercise. That will mean that you'll have um, a healthy calorie amount. You probably want to maintain. If you're fat, you want to be in a calorie deficit. If you're skinny, you want to be in a calorie surplus, so that we can get to a point where we've got the benefits without the risks. So yeah, you want to maintain. I'd say I'm not like one of those calculator people. I'm 10 to 25% body fat. It can't be much higher than 25%. I would not call myself fat. I would say I'm more on the skinny side than the fat side. So yeah, take that for what you will. So I would say I'm experiencing the risks. No, I'm saying I'm experiencing the benefits without the risks, which is what you should try and strive to do as well. And without and thank sorry. And with that, I would like to say thank you for watching this video. Thank you for listening to me say all of this. And if you've managed to get to the end of this video, I'd say this video has ended up being a good 17 to 20 minutes long. I'm not going to do the maths on that because I messed it up on the other video that I did it, and I had to do a little intro at the outro at the end saying that I made a mistake. But this video is probably going to end up being 17 to 20 minutes long. And if you have made it to the end of this 17 to 20 minute long video, then I do recommend liking and subscribing. As, yeah, it's nice and interesting stuff. And if you've watched it to the end, then you probably think it's nice and interesting, and it helps out a ton. And I like watching the numbers tick up when I look at my phone. So, thank you very much for watching. Hope you've had fun watching it. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you can apply what you've learned in your life, as this is all very healthy for you, in my opinion. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.